Psychology of COVID-19 and vaccine hesitancy in Jamaica. Fasten your seatbelts. We're about to take off with Dr. Leahcim Semaj.
Indeed, it's my pleasure, privilege to be here to share with you. And the subtitle of my thing is Reversing Vaccine Hesitancy, with a little help from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Now, this is what I do. I combine psychology with neuroscience, quantum physics, and the science of spirituality. So that's how we create a quantum transformation psychologist, because of all the things that are really necessary. And we know that transformation is not a series of incremental changes. It's a rather fundamental reboot that can actually take place and shift the trajectory of how we operate. I took on myself from the beginning of this whole COVID episode. I started studying the social psychology of the whole process. And so far, I've produced about 12 videos. These are all available. Looking at the, again, leadership. Oh, by the way, the 7 countries that have handled the process the best are all led by women. Breath. We've had to breathe very differently, and there's an impact. Touch. The world of work, relationships. Last year, the largest number of people went on Google to look at how to get a divorce. And the projection is going to be even more for this year coming. So, you know, a Jamaican saying, anyway, MAGA, it popped. We also are approaching the other pandemic, which is also this mental health, triggered by the biological pandemic. And of course, education. Upwards of 250,000 of our children have been totally unconnected from the socialization process of the educational institution. So we have some serious days ahead. Now, I want to start with this premise. Changing people's behavior is not a very easy thing. The first mistake is to assume that people are rational. The second mistake is to assume that people are eager to change. The third mistake is to assume that once somebody knows the things the way you know them, they will choose what you would choose. C'est la vie. No go so. Now, about a long time ago, Mark Twain said that life can travel halfway around the world while truth is still putting on its shoes. We now have instant global communication on social media. So this is now on steroids, how information is processed. Nietzsche was right. Individual insanity, he says, is rare, but group, parties, nations, epochs, it is the rule. We're seeing living testimony. We are reaping what was sowed. We're now in a world governed by something called post-truth, fake news, and alternate facts. We have a little problem. Vaccines, as we have heard in the previous presentations, are nothing new. Diseases have been controlled in an incredible way, and all of us have experienced this. So what is happening now is really true. The basis of my presentation is basically vaccine resistance is a behavioral disorder. We've been talking about the medical aspect of it. It's a behavioral disorder. Why do we say this? Low vaccine compliance is a public health issue that can cause the loss of herd immunity and lead to the spread of infectious disease. In many parts of Europe and North America, some of the things that we thought were gone forever, measles, mumps, whooping cough, have returned because they are contexts where persons literally have gone back to resisting vaccines, and the consequences are there. We are all in an experiment. We're betting our lives, seriously. I will take the vaccine, that's one bet. Other bet, I will not take the vaccine. One side is gonna win. Both sides can't win. Now, I can just flip through this data because we have the numbers in terms of what's been happening globally. So roughly where we are in Jamaica, 34% sure that they will not take it. 38% not sure they will take it. 29% we will take it. So we're saying, not just Houston, Jamaica, we have a problem. Trust is the big thing among the non-vaxxers. Serious information. Again, we saw some figures a while ago, the Jamaicans who are not vaccinated. And so we don't need to go over this again. August 6th, 10% of the population was fully. I think we're now just about 12% in terms of the latest figure. So we have a long way to go. Now, interestingly, looking ahead, November 8th, non-citizens visiting the United States will have to show proof of vaccination and a negative COVID test. How we're going to deal with that. November 28th, active duty sailors who are not fully vaccinated against COVID-19 could be discharged. Navy Reserve members must be fully vaccinated by December 20th. So we see that the policy directives from the North will clearly impact on our behavior here. These are some of the social issues that we have to contend with. So what's wrong with vaccine hesitancy? As you all well know, a partially immunized population is a fertile breeding ground for new viral variants. Some maybe even worse than what we're experiencing now, putting us all at risk. All at risk. Now, we have some serious work to do. But there's something called cognitive distortion, cognitive biases, distortion in judgment, which is impacting a lot of people. This undermines how the general public makes sense of scientific data and presents potential barriers of optimal decision making. No human population is immune to this process. These biases may be intensified by the current climate of uncertainty and public mistrust, by the things that we've identified, such as fake news, post-truth, and alternate facts. The brain is terrible at processing complex information, especially when it is emotionally loaded, like complex issues such as vaccine. I'm sure many of you are hearing some of the details for the first time. Instead, what the brain does, it relies on cognitive biases, shortcuts. Now, can you imagine the public shortcuts? There are several cognitive biases behind any vaccination decision that needs to be addressed. These biases are extremely common in most medical decision making. You well know the kind of myths that Jamaicans have about medicines and diseases and various conditions. So far, I've identified 11 cognitive biases. We're most familiar with the conspiratorial one, yeah? But folks, there are many more. Distortion of risk, collective good over personal choice over collective good, confirmation bias, availability bias, illusion of causality, vaccine distrust bias, the big one here, especially for men, fear of needle bias, and then there's profiling bias, omission bias. Maybe in the question, we can give you some more detail to break them down for you. And here's where our big problem lies. If we are treating this and talking as if there's just one thing, conspiracy theory, but the nature of the bias that the person is experiencing would determine how you reach that person. Every day, this observation made by Einstein becomes clearer. The difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits, but the kinds of cognitive distortion that people can come up with knows absolutely no limit. It's conspiracy theory, briefly. What it really is, you know, folks, is a few facts in quotation mark mixed with a special secret sauce. Now, you may know some of the facts, but you don't know the secret sauce. You cannot actively dissuade somebody who is governed by a conspiracy theory. This is what one anti-vaxxer that I track on social media, he posted this, he reposted this chart put out by the minister. And he circled one little piece here. No need to watch and see. You can feel confident. And what did he say? You see, why do I see things that most people don't? Because he's drawing people's attention to that. He just wants us to feel confident because you know it's not. I'll give you some more examples as we go through this quickly. Distorted risk. A lot of people have no sense of making sense of the kind of risk that are indeed possible. COVID vaccine, not acceptable because to them, the risk of the vaccine seems so much greater than the risk of getting seriously ill. Now, once they become seriously ill or somebody close to them, their risk factor changes. So we can see where that goes. Collective good. Framing vaccines and their impact on others is a whole different thing for people. Because if their focus is, look, all I care about is me. Don't tell me the nation needs to do something good. But the converse is that if the issue is really the collective thing is important to that person, you don't tell me that it's good for me. Don't waste my time with that nonsense. Again, the same person, here's what he tweeted yesterday. For years, politics, religion, and sexualities have been used to divide us. Now they want to use vaccine. If vaccinated people are only allowed to go around, only vaxxed, that's clear that the vaccine doesn't work. That's like going on contraception and you're not having sex. He makes it a duty every day he posts something akin to this. Confirmation bias. Beliefs beat out facts with these individuals. People see what they already believe. Confirmation bias makes it difficult for information to get through to them, and it cannot penetrate because their belief says no. Here's what the same vaccine that he wrote recently. I have a question. All these people who aren't showing up for the second dose, are they just staying away, or is it because they're part of the dead numbers that are not being reported? Dr. Ennis, have you heard this one before? Oh, so that's why we have so few a second, because the people who took the first dose and dead, they can't come back to get the second dose. That's the word out there. Availability bias. A risk that is familiar, such as vaccine being unsafe, will see it as much more serious than the risk of the disease itself. How do we get past this bias? Illusion of causality. Many people do not understand that causality, correlation is not causality. Look at the high correlation between shark attacks and ice cream sale. Huh? But don't tell them that. Again, the same individual recently tweeted, abortion is not as effective as they wish with popular control. So they have no rolled out mass mandatory vaccination. You understand how the mind works for distortion. Vaccine distrust. They worry about safety and unknown side effects. It's interesting to hear the gap between what has been documented and reported versus what has just been anecdotal information. Again, recently on Twitter, if you are fully vaccinated, why do you still have to wear a mask? Faced with medical mask, again, we understand the information. The big bad one, fear of needles. As hard as anti-vax people may try to pretend, this isn't a fact, it is possible. Many people just don't like needles. If you understand the kind of fear that is conjured up around to justify, because I don't want a needle, then this was profiling. Some people just love to profile. So whatever people are saying, I will take the opposite. I'm anti-science. I am anti-establishment. So how do you get past this one? One of my favorite, omission bias. Jamaican saying, better you do nothing and something happen to you than you do something and something happen to you. So we are up against a broad range of issues. 11 variations of the cognitive biases that fuel the anti-vax sentiment. Now, You can't change an anti-vax person's attitude or behavior by providing scientific evidence. Now, it is tempted to keep repeating the evidence, but the problem is that it's not about lack of evidence. The more you repeat, the greater the risk of the person having a boomerang effect, because the resistance just becomes stronger. Evidence, conspiracy belief, powerful. It's the strongest predictor of all the various biases. Correct information and myth busting about vaccination is either ineffective or counterproductive. So we have a big problem. You may feel frustrated, angry, even defeated after an argument with an anti-vax person. You may believe that nothing will change their mind other than getting the disease itself. This frustration is real. But what do we need to do? How do we go around it? First step, listen. What are they really saying? Diagnose. What bias are being expressed? What bias is being expressed? Step 2, get past the conspiratorial mindset. Rather than fight it, you could join it and make the argument that vested interests can conspire to. So you have a point there. So let's see, what can we do about it? Get past the mindset. I want to bring your attention. I hope many of you have read this book. If you haven't, this is something I read as an undergraduate in the early 70s. The Jet Propelled Couch is a series of essays on classical psychotherapeutic intervention. And the chapter that I want to bring to your attention, the 50-minute hour, the Jet Propelled Couch. A true story of a physicist who, he was a science fiction writer, but then he actually got so absorbed and drawn into his work that he started living in the world that he had created. What ultimately happened when the therapist one day just started talking to him in the language of the planet he had created? The physicist looked at him and said, "Boss, you're mad." This was what it took to draw him out when he now for the first time heard what he sounded like. The Jet Propelled Couch. Please, it's still available. Step 3, explore the other biases. Point out that it's conformist to go with the anti-vax movement. So the person who don't want to be a conformist, that's why he's doing this. But you are conforming to the anti-vax movement. What about the profiler? What do you say to the profiler who just wants to profile? What about the one who is totally afraid of needles? Unpeel the layers. Unpeel the layers until you get to it. Is a needle alone you're dealing with, no boss? Is that, Let's see if we can find a way around it for you. You can give a person knowledge, but you can't make them think. For some, it's convenient to remain fools because accepting the truth requires them to change. Change is a process. Change is a process. So what do we do? There's a maths of change. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, change happens. Do the maths. So far, we've identified 18 ways to approach vaccine hesitancy. Time will not permit me to go through all 18, but it's that number 1, there's something called a motivational interview process. You shoot the middle, speak the person's language. Much of what we have done, you can't change. Press conferences and pub releases don't change people's behavior. Is that the one? I'm happy to hear one of the previous presenters point out that patients trust clinicians. Patient trusts clinicians. Somebody who they can talk to, who they can reason out. Where have they been getting their information from? What I'm proposing is a verbal oral psychosocial vaccine. One more vaccine now, but not the medical type. Use in person, traditional media, or social media to share the diagnostics and the treatment of the 11 coronavirus cognitive disorders. Shared widely. The communication component of this information will act like a vaccine, meaning that person will be hearing, oh, it is not just your biases, there are 10 more. Vax resistors will now be predisposed to begin doubting the distortion of their own cognitive bias. We call this process cognitive dissonance. And they realize now they're not very special. Vax supporters will now learn how to diagnose and treat their friends and associates when we expose them to the 18 treatment strategies. And especially even persons in the same gathering here, the more knowledgeable you become, it's one thing for you to know the technical issue, but the psychosocial treatment modalities, those are what you really have to walk with to get through to people. So treatment modes, in person, mass media, social media, to administer the psychosocial vaccine. Some kind of national webinar training, just like we're having here, for the ground troops to diagnose and treat friends and associates with that direct. You don't win battles from the air. You got to get down on the ground, hand-to-hand combat. So what do we see now, folks? We have an incredible problem ahead of us. Humanity versus the coronavirus. I'm going to phrase this against the art of war. Sun Tzu, and you'll see why in a minute. Phase 1, before the battle. Sun Tzu says every battle is won before it's fought. If we had deployed a full behavioral defense against the enemy, mask, sanitize, social distance, we could have avoided the expensive and deadly medical defense, ICU, ventilators, vaccines. The enemy would now be defeated. If we had just deployed a full behavioral defense, I tried to raise this with the powers that be from the very beginning. Folks, while you're waiting for a vaccine, let's go with a flat out behavioral defense. We didn't do that. It is still our best shot. Phase 2. Sun Tzu says the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. So internal discord. Present information on the 11 variations of cognitive biases to the believers. Some will begin to doubt the validity of their own position as a result of cognitive dissonance. Some will move from definitely not to maybe. Some of the not sures and maybes will begin to quietly find reasons to move to yes. Some will now hide and juke. Very important category. Phase 3. Sun Tzu says, in all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed to secure victory. You realize that so much of the vaccine programs are done in mass, public, open events. Many defectors would prefer that their decisions and action remain secret. They hide and joke. Why don't he provide a facility so when somebody comes somewhere, they can say, I can just go talk to the nurse. I just want to talk to the doctor. And they go in a room, they go behind a curtain for their talk so they can privately hide and joke. They will come out and still talk about, I bad man no take vaccine. We can deal with them something there. No, we don't worry about that. We have their secret. Provide them, accommodate the defectors, because many want to defect, but they don't want to do so publicly. Phase 4, prepare the ground troops. We are talking to some ground troops right now. Train them with the 18 antidotes. There are 18 sets of strategies. These can be used against the not sures and the maybe. This will move some of them to the yes. Again, some will just hide and joke. Just by hearing the information, they will talk that they don't believe and don't want to go along with it, but they will hide and joke. Phase 5, the hardcore. Sun Tzu says, when you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Don't. Due to the cognitive dissonance and the antidote, some will move from maybe and with time to yes. Some will be convinced only by first-hand experience as persons close to them get sick and some start dying. Prepare ourselves for this. Phase 6, the art of war. When you're posed with an enemy that says no retreat, no surrender, some will fall on their own sword. It is said that the wise man learns from the mistake of the fool, but the fool from his own mistake. We will have some deathbed confessions and conversions. Some will take it all the way to the end. My estimation, we're talking about between 5 and 9%. Phase 7, as a result of phase 6, Darwin was right. We are also witnessing survival of the fittest, natural selection at work. And again, understand Darwin, it is not the strongest of the species that survived or the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Those who are not responding to change will have made some not irreversible decisions. We can't save all of them. So you understand what we're up against. All of these step by step, piece by piece, as we go through them, this is what will happen. Phase 8, the end of the war. Sun Tzu says that victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. I think that's what we've been doing. Once we deploy a full behavioral defense against the enemy, mask, sanitize, social distance, remember that from phase 1? We can avoid the expensive and deadly medical defense. The enemy will now be defeated. We still have this option to sell the behavioral issues. Mask, sanitize, social distance. To sell the behavioral flat out defense. From before the war, even after the war, it is still valid. Vaccine resistance is a behavioral disorder and has to be treated as such. We have some serious work to do. Thank you very much.